Hey, Brass Facts here. Been doing a lot of long range recently, and really beginning to push out the yardage or meters. No, never mind, this is America, the yardage. Pardon the wind here, we're easily pushing 15 miles an hour today, so this is quite brutal. One thing that you really quickly learn in the long range community is, in a lot of ways, you get what you pay for, chief among which is probably glass quality. You really don't want to skimp on glass quality when you're pushing out to range. Unfortunately, that very often means you're going to be spending upwards of $3,000 on premium glass. Fortunately, that's been looking to change quite recently. Leupold has come out with essentially a mid-tier budget line, which for Leupold still means it's actually quite premium, but also still decently expensive, with this Leupold Mk4 coming in at approximately $1,500. That's quite a chunk of change, but it's a good deal less than $3,000. In comes the Arken Ep5. This thing has been generating a lot of buzz because it is one of those cases where, allegedly, just as good comes into play. We're looking at something that costs right around $600, but sports near premium glass tier quality. So that's what we're going to be doing here today. We're going to be taking a look at these two lower end, and we're going to see how these two compare at extreme ranges for something like long range shooting. We're talking about 600 yards and beyond.
Both scopes are extremely structurally similar, so we're not going to linger here long. Standard tube, objective to zoom ratio, layout, ocular, and both weigh as much as my dog Nova. These are going on heavy dedicated DMR, ELR type setups, and basically nothing else. Read the on-screen prompts for the deets. Not going to get into them today. Let's go right to the part that you're all here for. How is the image quality? How does a $500 scope compare to a $1,500 scope? The short answer is worse. The long answer is you're actually going to probably struggle to tell the difference in most settings. Quick aside, I would be using some really cool long-range footage here, but the Trigger Cam 2.1 has to be one of the worst, most expensive electronic products I've ever had the fortune of getting my hands on. I'm sure at some point I'm going to get this thing to work, but my god, is the software side a giant hunk of shit on this thing. So you get a little bit of footage before my phone bricked up the device, which locked up everything, and then I gave up and shoved a cell phone camera behind it. So, usual disclaimers, cell phone camera footage, or just any footage behind a scope, is not indicative of what they look like in real life. I had both of these side by side in the same conditions, and I had to do the old number one, number two. Could I see number one again, please? Number one, or number two? Yeah, it's the same thing. And then you figure out that you're completely blind. No, I spent like 10 minutes going back and forth between these things, and it was tough to do much more than nitpick and question my sanity the entire time. There is some chromatic aberration and image degradation, especially when I kind of move my head a little bit off axis when I'm breathing, when I'm not quite, locked into the gun. A little bit of ghosting, you name it, right? And none of that is present with the Mk4. The Mk4 image stays very stable, for the lack of a better term, even as you kind of wiggle around in the eye box. The Mk4 also just focused a lot more readily, and you spent a lot less time kind of tinkering it, going back and forth, trying to get that perfect focus as you squint through 72,000 layers of mirage. But here's the interesting thing. While the Mk4 wins in objective glass clarity by maybe 10%, give or take, I would actually pick the Ep5 on image alone. Not because the image is particularly better, but because it's close enough, but also has 4 inches of eye relief compared to the Leupold's 4.5 inches of eye relief. It's not going to make much of a difference in terms of, usable eye relief. It's a shitload, but it's enough to result in the Ep5 having a noticeably larger image projection to the Mk4. That is, the image to you apparently will take up more of your visual horizon, and because we're not run and gunning, that is almost objectively just a good thing. Bigger images are slept on. It's why we like the ACOGs. It makes everything appear larger, which translates to larger perceived magnification, and a larger image means making out details is also, similarly, much easier. You combine that with the reticle design of the Ep5, which I find is, once again, preference, but just a little bit more finely etched and a little less busy, and the Ep5 ends up feeling wide open, while the Mk5, which is functionally very similar, ends up feeling very crowded and busy. Ignoring all that technical nonsense aside, I asked 4 people with these side by side, and everyone said the Ep5 looked slightly better, and I think that's telling.
Hey, my image was hazy, right? I use this little dial on the side.
Uh-huh.
It's just not hazy anymore.
Mine doesn't have one of those.
Why wouldn't it?
I don't know.
How much did you spend on that?
I don't want to talk about it.
So, is that it? Is the Mark IV just a complete scam? Leupold fleecing you for an extra $1,000? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. It's going to depend on the person. You've obviously heard about how money returns less the more you spend, but there's also something to be said about going so cheap that sometimes corners need to be cut. Diminishing returns goes both ways, where the one part the EP5 falls short in. So for example, the turrets, right? Do the EP5 turrets work? Yeah, absolutely, no question. I did a tracking test at 1,000 meters, dial up, shoot, hold, shoot, dial up, shoot, hold, shoot, dial up, shoot, hold, shoot. It shows that the turrets are functional and repeatable, so they work. But in terms of the little things, do I like these turrets? No, not even for this budget price tag. They tend to bind, stick, and varied amounts of pressure are required depending on your spin speed. And you're going to find you're going to be overshooting and then coming back, and it's going to bind again, skip forward several clicks. It's just not a smooth experience on the turret. The turrets, while they do have a zero-stop functionality, do not lock. This is more of a pet peeve on a rifle of this type because you're not really running and gunning with this, but it's still annoying when you mount the gun after pulling it out of your bag and find that 3 mils of wind just randomly got added in at some point, which is likely not helped by the fact that these are the largest turrets I've ever seen in my life. The turrets on the Leupold, on the other hand, are actually, is world-renowned the right word? Where I believe there's a number of other premium scope manufacturers that reuse the same design under license. No matter where you grip it, how fast or slow you spin it, it requires the exact same amount of force input every single time, allowing you to ride on that minimum force required and then letting off and stopping exactly where you want on demand every time. They also have an elegant locking button, which doubles as an indicator to show when you've done a full rotation, and this quality extends to all the other control surfaces. Parallax adjust, smooth, the zoom lever, smooth. The turrets, as I mentioned, very nice. And the focus diopter adjust, amazing. The Arken, well, absolutely functional and not really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, it feels clunky by comparison. When we wrap this up, I think most people are going to come to the same conclusion. The EP5 is going to be by far the better bang for buck. It's what you're going to buy when you're balling on a budget, and unlike a lot of really low-end budget scopes, this isn't low-end. You're not going to be upset owning this thing. From a performance standpoint, the EP5 is in fact mostly just as good. The EP5 puts all of its budget where it matters the most, the image quality. I respect it. I think it's a damn good scope, and I'm probably going to use this as my go-to recommendation for anyone that asks for something in the 5x25 range. Just a quick interlude doing this after the editing. I want to be sure to note, the EP5 isn't the only scope in this kind of class of really doing well in the new age of budget scopes. The Burris XTR series, for example, is really good, sporting very good glass quality, having excellent reticle designs, very finely etched, very nice to look through, while also having significantly better turrets, though it costs slightly more than the EP5. But yeah, keep that guy in mind. It's also an excellent scope. Yeah, here comes the Leupold cope. I don't think the Leupold is just utterly outclassed, despite costing 3 times more and functionally, in some ways, having less features considering it doesn't come with fucking illumination. This sounds like wine-sippy, commie-fuck, hippie shit, but I do care about how I interface with the scope. I do care about refinement, especially on my more expensive setup. I care that when I breathe, my image stays consistent instead of having some weird color shifts like I do on the EP5. I care that my turrets feel ultra nice and click very cleanly because that's how I'm interfacing with the gun most of the time. I care that the image focuses up just that little bit nicer and does so far more consistently. And I guess in theory, I care about the glass coatings even though I'm not convinced it's a thing half the time. Oh, and I guess weighing almost an entire suppressor less certainly is a nice cherry on top. And those little things do add up. Now, do they add up to $1,000 without illumination over the EP5? Gonna depend on the person, right? If this was a general-purpose fighting rifle, I'd be a lot less inclined to give a shit. But if this is a long-range precision rifle where I'm launching $2 round slugs downrange on a very expensive setup, yeah, even though it's probably not going to functionally change my performance, having a nicer interface is, well, nicer. But I'm not going to scoff or demand that anyone thinks this or views this as the minimum barrier to entry for long-range shooting. I think the EP5 has absolutely shown that to not be the case. Alright, time to get yelled at by glass snobs.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later.
Nova, it's time to wash the dog. Come on, let's go. Oh, you're so sore from the trip. Go on, in the bath. Wrong way. In the bath. In the bath. Oh, yeah.